Revenge buzz. My mother grabbed my veil and ripped it off my head right there at the altar. "You don't deserve to wear white," she screamed in front of everyone. My sister laughed and said I looked like a fraud in a wedding dress. But what happened next changed everything forever. Hi everyone, I'm Emma and I'm 28 years old. I work as a pediatric nurse at a children's hospital. And honestly, I've always been the quiet one in my family. You know, that person who tries to keep the peace, who bends over backward to make everyone else happy? That was me. I wasn't rich or glamorous like my sister Madison. I didn't have designer clothes or a trust fund. But I had something they didn't expect, a heart full of love and a man who saw me for who I really was. My whole life I watched my mother and sister treat me like I was invisible. Madison was the golden child, the one who got the fancy college education, the expensive cars, the family vacations I was never invited to. Meanwhile, I worked double shifts to pay my way through nursing school. But when David proposed to me after 3 years together, I thought maybe, just maybe, my family would finally see my worth. I thought they'd be happy for me. I was so wrong. If you've ever been pushed aside by family, subscribe right now and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. This story gets so much worse before it gets better. The problem started the moment David and I announced our engagement. We were at Sunday dinner, something my mother insisted on every week, though she spent most of these dinners fawning over Madison's latest shopping sprees. "David and I have some news," I said, showing them my simple but beautiful engagement ring. It wasn't huge, but it was chosen with love. Madison looked up from her phone for exactly 2 seconds. "Oh, that's nice," she said with the enthusiasm of someone commenting on the weather. My mother's reaction was even worse. She actually sighed, a long dramatic sigh that filled the entire dining room. "Well, I suppose we should start planning," she said, like I'd just announced a funeral instead of my engagement. But then Madison dropped the real bomb. "Actually, Mom, Tyler and I have been talking about getting married too. And since his family has connections at the Ritz-Carlton, we were thinking of a spring wedding." My mother's entire face lit up. "Oh honey, that's wonderful. A spring wedding at the Ritz would be absolutely perfect." "Wait," I said, feeling confused. "But David and I already booked our venue for April 15th. We put down deposits." Madison's expression turned ice cold. "You can't get married in April, that's my month, you'll have to change your date." "Madison, we booked first." "Emma, don't be ridiculous," my mother interrupted. "Madison's wedding is going to be a much bigger event. She needs the spring season for photos. You can get married in the fall or something." The room went silent except for the sound of my father clearing his throat. "But we already have everything planned," David said quietly. "We've paid deposits." Madison slammed her hand on the table. The silverware jumped. "I don't care what you've paid. This is my time to shine, and I won't have Emma stealing my thunder like she always tries to do." "When have I ever?" I started, but my mother cut me off. "Emma, just change the date, don't make this harder than it needs to be." That's when I saw it, the look that passed between my mother and sister. It was a look of conspiracy, like they'd been planning this conversation, like they knew exactly how to push me back into my place. What I didn't realize was that this was just the beginning. They had so much worse planned for me. Over the next few months, the attacks escalated. Every wedding decision became a battle. The first major incident happened at the bridal shop. My mother had insisted on coming with me to choose my dress, and I foolishly thought it was a sign that she wanted to be involved. Madison tagged along, claiming she wanted to help. The boutique smelled like fresh roses and expensive perfume. When I tried on the dress I loved, a simple but elegant A-line with delicate lace sleeves, I came out of the dressing room feeling beautiful for the first time in months. "What do you think?" I asked nervously. Madison wrinkled her nose like she'd smelled something rotten. "It's very plain. Don't you think something with more coverage would be better? I mean, with your arms?" My mother nodded. "Madison's right, dear. Maybe something less revealing would be more appropriate for someone your size." The consultant looked uncomfortable. "Actually, this dress is very flattering on her figure." "We didn't ask you," my mother snapped. The woman stepped back like she'd been slapped. Then my mother turned to me. "Emma, you need to be realistic about what looks good on you. This isn't Madison's body we're working with." I changed back into my regular clothes with tears in my eyes. When I came out, they were already looking at dresses for Madison's wedding, laughing and bonding like I wasn't even there. The second betrayal happened at my engagement party. David and I had planned a small gathering at our apartment, nothing fancy, just close friends and family. My mother showed up an hour late with Madison in tow. "Sorry we're late," she announced to the room. Madison had some exciting news to share. Before I could stop her, Madison stood up in the middle of my engagement party and announced that she and Tyler had just booked the Ritz-Carlton for their wedding. "We wanted to tell everyone together," she gushed. "Tyler's family is flying in from Europe for the ceremony." My guests politely congratulated her, but I could see the confusion in their eyes. This was supposed to be about David and me. My mother spent the rest of the evening showing everyone photos of Madison's venue on her phone. "Look at these chandeliers, and this ballroom can hold 300 people." She never once mentioned my upcoming wedding. The third and most painful incident happened during my final dress fitting. I had found a different dress, one that made me feel confident despite my family's earlier comments. But when I arrived at the boutique, my mother and Madison were already there. "Surprise," my mother said with fake enthusiasm. "We thought we'd help with your final fitting." What they actually did was spend the entire appointment criticizing everything. The dress was too tight, the veil was too long, my shoes were the wrong color. "Are you sure you want to go through with this wedding?" my mother asked as the seamstress made adjustments. Her pins felt sharp against my skin. "David seems lovely, but are you really ready for marriage? You've always been so immature." Madison laughed. "Remember when we were kids and Emma used to pretend to be a princess? She'd put on Mom's old bedsheet and pretend it was a wedding dress." "She was so delusional," my mother added, "always living in this fantasy world." They weren't talking to me, they were talking about me, like I was a child who couldn't understand adult conversations. The seamstress kept working quietly, but I could see the pity in her eyes. That night I called David crying. Maybe they're right, maybe I'm not ready for this. Maybe I'm just some delusional little girl playing dress-up. David drove over immediately. He held me while I sobbed and told me something I'll never forget. "Emma, you are the strongest woman I know. You work miracles with sick children every day. You put yourself through nursing school. You've survived a lifetime of their cruelty and somehow remained kind. Don't let them convince you that you're anything less than extraordinary." But I still had no idea what they were planning for the wedding day itself. What my family didn't know was that David came from money. Serious money. His family owned a chain of successful medical equipment companies across the East Coast, but David had chosen to work as a physical therapist because he wanted to help people, not just make profits. He drove a modest Honda, lived in a simple apartment, and never flaunted his family's wealth. To my mother and Madison, he looked like just another average guy who wasn't good enough for their family's social status. But David had been quietly documenting every cruel comment, every humiliating moment my family put me through. He started recording our Sunday dinners on his phone after the engagement party incident. "Why are you doing this?" I had asked him one night. "Because someone needs to witness how they treat you," he said. "Someone needs to have proof of who they really are." David's best man, Marcus, was actually a successful lawyer who specialized in family law. The two of them had grown up together, and Marcus had watched David fall in love with me over the past 3 years. He'd also heard every story about my family's treatment. "Emma deserves so much better," Marcus told David one evening when they thought I couldn't hear them. "What they're doing to her is emotional abuse." "I know," David replied, "and I'm not gonna let them ruin our wedding day. If they want to play games, I'll make sure everyone sees exactly who they are." 3 weeks before our wedding, David received a call that would change everything. His grandfather, who had been fighting a long illness, had passed away. But along with the grief came an unexpected inheritance. His grandfather's estate was worth more than anyone had realized. David didn't tell me about the inheritance right away. He was processing his own grief and didn't want money to complicate our wedding. But he did make one important decision. He upgraded our honeymoon to a 2-week trip to Europe, something we had only dreamed about before. What none of us knew was that my mother and Madison had been planning their own surprise for the wedding day. They thought they'd found the perfect way to humiliate me one final time. They had no idea what was waiting for them. As the wedding day approached, an unexpected ally emerged, David's mother, Catherine. She was everything my mother wasn't. Warm, supportive, and genuinely excited about our marriage. Catherine had noticed my family's treatment during our few interactions and she wasn't having it. "Emma, honey," she said to me the night before the wedding, "I want you to know that David's father and I are so proud to have you joining our family. We've never seen our son happier." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I've noticed your family can be challenging. Tomorrow is your day. Don't let anyone take that from you." David's father, Robert, was more direct. During the rehearsal dinner, he pulled David aside. "Son, I've been watching how that woman talks to your fiancé. If there's any trouble tomorrow, you just give me the word. Marcus, David's best man, had his own concerns. I've got a bad feeling about tomorrow, he told David privately. Your future mother-in-law and sister-in-law have been whispering in corners all evening. They're planning something. I know, David said, but Emma deserves to have her dream wedding. Whatever they're planning, we'll handle it. Meanwhile, my family was growing more confident by the hour. At the rehearsal dinner, I overheard Madison talking to my mother in the bathroom. The sound of running water couldn't hide their whispers. Did you talk to the photographer? Madison asked. All set, my mother replied. He knows what to do during the ceremony. And the speech? Don't worry, by tomorrow night everyone will know exactly who Emma really is. I didn't understand what they meant, but a cold dread settled in my stomach. The morning of the wedding, the tension was unbearable. My bridesmaids, David's sister Sarah, and my college friend Jenny tried to keep me calm while we got ready. The hotel room smelled like hairspray and vanilla candles. You look absolutely beautiful, Sarah said as she helped with my veil. My brother is the luckiest man alive. But I could see my mother and Madison exchanging looks in the mirror behind me. They kept checking their phones and whispering. Is everything okay, Mom? I asked. Everything's perfect, dear, she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Today is going to be a day no one ever forgets. An hour before the ceremony, David texted me. Whatever happens today, remember that I love you more than anything in this world. You are my everything. I thought it was just pre-wedding nerves. I had no idea he was preparing for war. As I stood at the back of the church, waiting for my cue to walk down the aisle, I felt beautiful and hopeful. The organ music filled the air. Finally, after years of feeling invisible, this was my moment to shine. I had no idea that in 10 minutes my mother would be ripping the veil off my head. The ceremony started perfectly. The church was filled with white roses and baby's breath. Soft music played, and David stood at the altar looking handsome in his navy suit. For a moment, I forgot all about my family's strange behavior and just focused on marrying the man I loved. But as I reached the halfway point down the aisle, my mother suddenly stepped out of her pew. Wait, she called out, her voice echoing off the stone walls. Stop the music. The entire congregation turned to stare. David's face went pale, but he stepped forward immediately. Mrs. Peterson, what's wrong? He asked. My mother walked directly up to me, her heels clicking on the marble floor. Her face was twisted with a cruel satisfaction I'd never seen before. I'm sorry, everyone, but I can't let this continue. Mom, what are you doing? I whispered, my bouquet shaking in my hands. Emma, you know what you did, she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. You know you don't deserve to wear white. Before I could react, she reached up and grabbed my veil, yanking it off my head so hard that several bobby pins went flying. They hit the floor with tiny metallic sounds. You're not pure enough for this, she hissed. The church erupted in gasps. I stood there in shock, my carefully styled hair now a mess, my veil crumpled on the floor like a discarded tissue. But Madison wasn't finished. She stood up from her seat and walked over, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. Everyone should know the truth about Emma, she announced to the horrified crowd. She's been lying to David about who she really is. She's not the sweet, innocent nurse she pretends to be. Madison, stop, I pleaded, tears starting to fall. She's been stealing from the hospital, Madison continued, her lie delivered with perfect conviction. Taking supplies, medications, she's going to be fired next week. The church fell deadly silent. Even the sound of breathing seemed too loud. I saw David's family looking shocked, my own guests staring at me with confusion and judgment. That's not true, I cried. Madison, why are you doing this? Because someone needs to save David from making the biggest mistake of his life, my mother said. Marrying a thief and a liar. That's when David stepped forward. His face was calm, but his voice carried an authority I'd never heard before. Stop, he said quietly, but the single word silenced the entire church. Just stop. He walked over to me and gently picked up my veil, carefully placing it back on my head. Then he turned to face my mother and sister. Ladies and gentlemen, David said, his voice now carrying to every corner of the church. I'd like to share something with all of you. He pulled out his phone and pressed play. Marcus had already connected it to the church's sound system. Suddenly my mother's voice filled the space. Did you talk to the photographer? All set. He knows what to do during the ceremony. And the speech? Don't worry. By tomorrow night, everyone will know exactly who Emma really is. The recording continued, playing back weeks of conversations David had secretly captured. My mother calling me pathetic. Madison saying I was delusional and embarrassing to the family. Their plan to humiliate me at my own wedding. The church listened in horrified silence as my family's cruelty was exposed for everyone to hear. When the recording ended, David's voice was steel. These women have spent months trying to destroy Emma's happiness and self-worth. They planned this disruption to humiliate her on what should be the happiest day of her life. He looked directly at my mother. Emma is a pediatric nurse who has never stolen so much as a bandage. She works overtime to buy toys for sick children with her own money. She is the most honest, caring person I've ever known. Then David did something that made the entire church gasp. He got down on one knee right there in front of everyone. "Emma Peterson," he said, his eyes locked on mine. "Will you marry me anyway? Right here, right now, in front of everyone who truly loves you?" The silence stretched forever. And then, something beautiful happened. Through my tears, I looked around the church. David's family was smiling with tears in their eyes. My real friends were nodding encouragement. Even some of the guests I barely knew looked moved by David's gesture. "Yes," I whispered, then louder. "Yes, I'll marry you." The church erupted in cheers and applause. The sound was like thunder. The minister, who had watched the entire scene unfold, stepped forward with a gentle smile. "Well then," he said, "let's have a wedding." As David slipped the ring onto my finger, I looked over at my mother and Madison. They were standing frozen in the aisle, their faces red with embarrassment and rage. Several guests were openly staring at them with disgust. Marcus quietly escorted them out while we finished our vows. I heard later that they left without saying a word to anyone. For the first time in my life, their silence didn't hurt me, it freed me. When David and I walked back down the aisle as husband and wife, I finally understood what it felt like to be truly loved and protected. That was 5 years ago, and David and I are happier than ever. I never spoke to my mother or Madison again, and honestly, my life has been so much more peaceful without their drama. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most are the ones who hurt you the deepest. But real love, the kind worth fighting for, will always protect you. If you've ever had to stand up to family betrayal, hit subscribe and tell me your story in the comments. Where are you watching from? Drop it below. I read every single one, and your courage inspires me every day.